Hey, hey, hey. I am not the act tonight, if you might be thinking that. I have no jokes, so that's definitely not what you've come for. But I am here to remind you of some really fun COVID guidelines. So first of all, please all keep your snazzy masks on, unless you're exempt drinking or eating. So yes, John, you are okay right now. If you, for any reason, need to leave your seat to go to the bar or go to the toilet, please follow our wonderful one-way system. It is outside and down the middle. Keep to your seats, please. Anyone will want to have a dance. If you do, don't. I think that's it, really. Any other COVID guidelines you want to know about? Cool, that's good. Then I have nothing else but to introduce our next act, who is the wonderful comedian Cheng with the show To All the Racists I've Blocked Before. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, hello. This is fun. We having fun? Very excited to be here on stage. I've not done this show live for about 2 years now, but I did do it on Zoom 2 days ago in preparation of this. And let me tell you, I'm very used to Zoom gigs right now, so it'll be very helpful if you do laugh to make sure you have a 5-second delay. That was too quick, guys. You got to do it a lot better than that. Also, when I did that gig, 5 minutes into the show, I got a message saying, you have 10 minutes left of your Zoom call. Please upgrade to Zoom Premium. So the whole audience watched me upgrade my Zoom account to Zoom Premium. And let me tell you, that was probably the highlight of the show. So I'm trying to find a way to incorporate that tonight. You don't really get that kind of like high stakes jeopardy in live comedy. And I love it. I love it. It is great. It's very rare that anything happens while I'm on stage tonight that I'll have to then get out my credit card details and pay £14. So that was fun. So yeah, this show I did about 2 years ago. It's called To All the Racists I've Blocked Before. It's entirely about racism. You guys heard of racism, by the way? It's pretty niche. It's got quite a big following online, though. Some people are really into it. I'm talking hardcore super fans. They follow all the behind the scenes. They sometimes dress up in the costumes. They get the matching tattoos. But equally, there are a lot of casual fans as well. You know, people who, don't follow it religiously, but they tune in when it's on, and they do enjoy it. Basically, what I'm trying to say is racism is a lot like Doctor Who. It's both a niche and a defining part of British mainstream culture. So yeah, there were a lot of challenges in doing this show when I did it. I did it 2 years ago, and I've discovered a lot of challenges. First of all, because it's a comedy show, it's quite a hard dilemma. It's like, how do I accurately paint a picture of racism and discrimination while also producing hard-hitting lols? It's a hard tightrope to walk. For off one side, it's anti-racist, but not very funny, becomes more of a lecture. For off the other side, it's very funny, but somehow I've become pro-racist. Very tricky. Second challenge is that basically whether there's even a show or not depends entirely on how much racism I receive in my day-to-day life, which kind of messes with you, because every time something racist happens to me, I'm like, no, racism, but also, yes, content. I'm like, oh, that racism is worth about 3 to 5 minutes of material. It's tricky because, ideally, I'd receive, over the course of my life, exactly 55 minutes of racism. Any more, and you've got surplus racism, which is much worse than normal racism, because it's racism that's also inefficient. Nothing worse than that. I don't know what I'd do basically, there was no problem with that. There was no shortage of material in that regard. I don't know what I'd do if this was the year that I received no racism. I don't know what I'd do. Wouldn't that be a bummer? The terrible timing. Imagine if that's the time they choose to solve racism. I don't know what I'd do. I'd have to walk out into the street at night, just hoping for any random white person to say something racist towards me. You know, kind of like a reverse Liam Neeson. Challenge number 3 is making sure your references are up to date. That is a big problem because, like, I wrote this show 2 years ago, and there's been so much new racism, which is bad, but content. 4th challenge is it's a very divisive show. It gets quite a mixed response depending on who's in the audience. Some races tend to enjoy it more than others. I'm not going to say who. That's for you guys to work out. But I discovered this when I was doing it in Edinburgh. That would get quite a mixed response, varying on day to day. And I thought it would be fine. I thought in the build-up it would be fine. Doing the show to my friends in London, I thought that's a fair representation of society. But then I did a show in a place called Hitchin in Hertfordshire. And, well, the show is called To All the Races I've Blocked Before. And I think all of them turned up to my show in Hitchin. It was not good. They thought it was an invitation. I did a tour 2 years ago, my first ever UK tour, and I went to do comedy in places I've never been before, and it became very clear to me, it was very interesting, it became very clear that we now live in a very deeply divided country. And the main thing that people are divided over is whether or not they think my jokes are funny, which is not good. Like, take Shrewsbury. I did a gig in Shrewsbury, and Shrewsbury is one of these places which is 98% white British. I don't think they've even seen a Chinese person before, especially one who's not doing some form of martial arts. But it's tricky because it's hard to do my material because a lot of my material is stories of incredibly racist things that people have said to me. And it's very hard to do that material if you're not entirely sure the audience aren't the same people who would say those things. They're just like, yep, that is what we would say. This is very relatable content. Someone just taking notes in a corner. I think it's a TED talk on how to speak to minorities. I did a gig in Ayton, which is a small village in the Scottish borders with 600 people. And in the interval, a man in his 60s came up to me and he just seen my set entirely about race. And he opened with this. He said, "Would it be okay if I said something mildly racist towards you right now?" I've never had that happen to me before. Someone asking me for my consent before they racially abuse me. Is this a new thing? Like how GDPR changed internet cookies? They make you click accept now. Anyway, I said yes because I'm Chinese, but I'm also British Chinese. I'm very polite. And he then pointed to the menu on the bar, and he pointed out that the items on the menu are numbered. And he turned to me and he said, "This must make you feel right at home." I didn't know how to break it to him, but I don't live in a Chinese takeaway. And even if I did, I wouldn't be using the menu to order food at home. That doesn't make any sense. But I didn't say any of that. I just laughed politely. And then he then said to me, "Are you going to use that joke in your stand-up?" And I thought, in a way. Yeah, the 5th challenge is that racism is probably too vast and complex a topic nowadays to cover in under an hour. And I accept it's got very complicated these days. I mean, they're even reading lists now. I saw a lot of people shared those reading lists, and it was great. I think that's a great thing that people shared those reading lists, but it's also quite adorable. It's like, how are we going to solve systemic racism? I know, let's set ourselves some homework, which is adorable. My girlfriend, who is white, lives with other white housemates, and in their house, they have 4 copies of Natives by Akala, and only 3 people live there. It's adorable. It's great stuff. It has got very complicated. I think the main issue is that we don't have a general consensus about what racism is anymore. We don't have the same definitions of racism. It's constantly changing. I think older generations had quite a narrow specific definition of racism is that it has to be very overt and direct hatred, but which allows a lot of people to go, I don't hate other races, so therefore I'm not a racist, which is no different from me saying I don't hate animals, therefore I'm a vegetarian. It's the exact same. There's another misconception that it has to be uneducated people being racist, that racists are all uneducated and stupid. But that's not true. A lot of racists are very well educated. In fact, they spend a lot of money on educational institutions that make them even more racist. Eton. And here's how I think it works. Uneducated racists read the Daily Mail. Educated racists write for the Daily Mail. Thank you. Another misconception is that it has to be intentional, that you have to intend to say something racist. And that's not true. Anyone these days can turn around and go, oops, I've done a racism. That's very common, to have accidental racism. The truth is, it's not a binary. You're not either completely racist or not racist. It's more of a spectrum, like the Nando's spice scale. A lot of people out there are extra hot racists. Equally, there are a lot of lemon and herb racists too, and we've got to worry about those. Here's an example. Every time anyone ever comes up to me in the street, it's for one of two reasons. One, they're a big fan of Phil Wang. Or two, they know about 5 to 10 words in Mandarin. So I'll see someone approaching me, and I know exactly what they're going to say when they get to me, because they get to me, and they'll say something like, ni hao, or konnichiwa, or sometimes both, one after the other. It's good to hedge your bets, I guess. There's a real scattergun approach of meeting East Asians. And the thing about that is it's not as bad as actual abuse, but it's still weird and uncomfortable and pointless, because I don't even know Mandarin. English is my only language. And that's fun. And that is the deal with a lot of lemon and herb racism. It's pointless. I think the issue is, we just all have a different definition of race and racism. And that leads to a lot of debate these days. It leads to a lot of debate about whether any specific interaction is or isn't racist, which I have to say, people of color, we love doing. We love spending our finite time on this earth having to debate racism. Out of all the things that I want to do, after I have a racist interaction, the one thing I want is to then have that experience cross-examined with the same level of scrutiny as the O.J. Simpson trial. That's exactly what I want from that situation. Just really get in there and gaslight me. Just deny. Really act like you're trying to write the next government race report. That's what I want from that situation. And to top it off, make sure you do include the phrase, I was just playing devil's advocate, to make sure it really was a waste of everyone's time. We've got very good at racism denial. I think that's the thing. Another misconception is that people think racists will just admit to being racist, but a lot of people don't even know that they're racist. Like the replicants in Blade Runner, they're replicant racists. And I'm talking about people who are just like walking around and suddenly they just get irate at Meghan Markle for no reason. They have no idea why. If you ask anyone who hates Meghan Markle why they hate Meghan Markle, they won't be able to answer you. That's the thing. They'll say something like, oh yeah, she put her hand on a baby bump or something. And it's the exact same thing that Kate Middleton did several years before. That's the only thing that Meghan Markle was guilty of, doing the exact same things that Kate Middleton did while having darker skin. That's all it is. What else am I going to talk about today? Denial, racism denial, that's where we're at. There's a lot of racism denial in the UK, and people got very good at it. People got very, very, very good at racism denial, that everyone has a lot of stock phrases they use to deny that they could be racist. One of the most common ones is, I can't be racist. Some of my friends are minorities. A classic one. Anytime anyone says that, I'm like, Oh, thank God. Oh, thank God you said something. Because now I could trust every single thing you say. You should have said that earlier. I think you should wear a badge that says that. You should get like an NHS discount for that. You are the real hero, I think. That is true heroism, to have ethnic friends and then use them as an excuse to say dodgy things. That's definitely not the sign of a not racist. Definitely not a red flag there. Basically, the rule of online Twitter or that is that anytime there's any story about racism, someone will come in and deny that is racist. Case in point, Liam Neeson. If you don't remember what Liam Neeson said, I'll remind you. In an interview 2 years ago, he basically admitted that for a while, when in his younger days, he went around, walking around in the street at night, just hoping to bump into any random black person so he could kill that random black person. Look, Liam, you don't have to share every thought. Some thoughts can remain private. Like, if anyone said that to me, I'd be like, no one asked for that. It was weird. That's the thing. I don't know what was weirder, to have done that or to admit that you've done that. And a lot of people defended him. A lot of people defended it as saying, they said it was someone saying, I used to be racist, but I'm not racist anymore, which is a good thing. But he didn't say that. He said, I used to want to kill black people. Now I don't want to kill black people, which is not enough evidence to prove that you're not a racist. If someone said that to me just like that, I would say, I have further questions. A lot of people defended him. Some people said he should be applauded for what he said. Some people said he should be applauded. That's a low bar for applause. We applaud things for like being good works of art, like concerts and plays. I hope to get a round of applause at the end of this show. And I like to think that my stand-up isn't on the same level of achievement as Liam Neeson simply deciding, black people should live. If you think Liam Neeson deserved applause, then you're the same kind of person who claps when a pilot successfully lands a plane. It's like, no, that is the bare minimum we should expect from someone in that situation. He didn't even explain how he got over his racism. He said he walked around for a week and a half and he just walked off his racism. That turns out that's a cure for all racism. Power walking, 10,000 steps. It would be great if that was the case. EDL marches would solve themselves. The Duke of Edinburgh will become the main force for anti-racism, which is a very ironic sentence. R.I.P. I wrote that before he died, and I'd still write it today. It's still true. He's still racist when he's dead. We're not educating people well enough on race. That's the thing. I first learned about racism by receiving it, which is not a good way to learn something complex. It's like learning about sex by walking in on your parents doing it. You're just like, I don't know what this is, but still horrible. I remember my first ever experience of racism was when I was about 6 or 7 years old. I was walking home from school, and there was this boy and a girl outside their house, and they started singing at me. They started singing the one line over and over again. They started singing this one line, "Chickadee China, the Chinese chicken." They sang that one line over and over again directly at me. And the most annoying part of that is, it's just so catchy. It's such catchy racism. Like, it's annoying when you get a song stuck in your head. It's even worse when that song is direct racial abuse. Like, at least Call Me Maybe isn't a hate crime, arguably. I'll tell you a bit more about my upbringing. I grew up in Cambridge, and I went to one of the worst primary schools in Cambridge. I remember this because actually one day it was in the Cambridge Evening News that it was the worst primary school. And for some reason, I cut out that bit of newspaper and brought it into school to show everyone. I was just like, look at us, we're losers. And the teachers did not appreciate that at all. I was one of the only Chinese people in my school, in my primary school, probably like one of 3 or 4, but I was definitely the only Chinese kid in my class all the time, and it very much felt like I had been added to the class so the film would sell well in the China market. That was the vibe. I was very much the token. The token in my friendship groups. In fact, people even called me token, or at least that's what they put on my Christmas cards. Sure, there was a space between the toe and the Ken, but the point remains the same, I think. I fulfilled the very common Chinese stereotype as a kid that I was very uncool. I was not cool at school. You know how some kids are too cool for school? Well, I was the exact amount of cool for school, which is not very cool. I'll give you an example. One time I was playing football at lunch, and I just forgot which team I was on. There's a lot of me running around trying to not affect the game for either one team or the other. There's a lot of running sideways in that situation. It's very hard to add a level of ambiguity to team sports. There's a lot of me running near the person with the ball, being like, am I going to tackle you, or am I just offering you emotional support? Eventually someone was like, Ken, what the hell are you doing? And I had to just be like, look, I don't know which team I'm on. Wasn't very cool. I think growing up in the 90s and noughties, there was this kind of idea that we were living post-racism. That's what kind of adults taught us at the time. I remember being told that we're kind of post-racist, like all the important battles had been won and racism was no longer a big deal. And there's a whole generation of post-racists who say stuff like, I don't even see color. They'll say a lot of post-racist phrases like that. I don't even see color. If you show me a picture of a black person and a white person, I don't see color. I just see two white people. It's the kind of thing they say. And I grew up kind of post-racist. I remember thinking, actually, I don't think I'd experienced that much. I remember going into my teens that I thought, actually, that Chinese people aren't really the victim of racism that much. And the main reason I thought that is because I had good GCSEs. That was the only reason. But it was wrong, obviously, in hindsight. But when I started doing comedy, I still felt that we're kind of post-racist. And I remember it was quite unfashionable to talk about your race when I started doing comedy. It was like not seen as, it was seen as kind of cheap and pointless and kind of, yeah, it was bad because we had solved racism, so why were you talking about it? And I started comedy choosing not to talk about race. I didn't want to talk about race. But turns out even when you don't want to talk about race, it's still going to come up. I'll tell you my first ever TV acting job. My first ever TV acting role was in a sitcom, and I had 2 lines. And how they approached me to play this character is actually I got a message on Twitter, a DM from someone working on a show, and it opened with this. It said, "Hi, Ken. We're looking for a, how do you put this, funny Chinese-looking fella." Not someone Chinese, but a Chinese-looking fella, which I guess I am. So tick. Now, the worst part of that was that the only reason they were asking me was because Phil Wang was busy. And I know this because he told me. He told me in that message, he said, "We're coming to you as a Phil Wang reserve." I don't mind that concept. It kind of implies that if Phil Wang were to die, I would inherit all his work. Like, I'm next in a line of succession of Chinese comedians. I'm the vice president Chinese comedian. I'm the vice Wang. But anyway, I took the job. Obviously, it was my first ever TV credit. I'll obviously take the job. And now you can look me up on IMDb and it will say Ken Cheng playing a character called Phil. Kept the name as Phil. I chose to keep the name as Phil to remind myself of the pecking order. That's pecking spelt without a C, by the way. Years later, I got another job offer, which is that I had an agent at this point, and I got an email through from my agent which said, "We got a role which is perfect for Ken. We got a role which is perfect for Ken. We want Ken to play a member of the Viet Cong." It's not quite perfect, is it? It's about 300 miles south of being perfect. Even though I'm the right race, what about me screams guerrilla warfare? I don't think I was quite perfect with that. But I took the job. Obviously, take the job, and that's how I ended up playing a member of the Viet Cong called Phil. They're all called Phil. Every single one's called Phil. at some point, I started talking about race after that, and I started tweeting about race, which is a big mistake. A huge mistake to tweet about race. I was not ready for the level of racial abuse that you get when you start tweeting about race. And sure, a lot of my tweets about race go viral and get a lot of likes and retweets, but is it worth it? Yes. Ultimately, yes. I love the dopamine, pump it into my veins. But things got, I thought things would quiet down because of the pandemic, but they did not. People got more racist in the pandemic. I got a lot of bad tweets. Now, obviously, as someone of Chinese descent, I have a lot to say about the coronavirus, especially as I created it in a lab, I think. I don't remember this happening, of course, but when you read the claim of a stranger with 19 followers and a profile picture of a full English breakfast, you tend to trust their sources. It's what the well-informed members of the Twitter community seem to suggest, that I, Cheng, comedian, am the sole inventor of COVID-19. It's a crazy time. A lot of people call it a Chinese virus. Call it a Chinese virus. Interesting. First time China gets credit for anything. Like, no one calls it the Chinese crossbow. It's interesting what people decide to assign a nationality to. Like, no one calls it the Greek marbles. Who the fuck even is Elgin anyway? Oh, he's the guy who stole the marbles? Let's name it after him? Okay, that makes sense. Great naming conventions right there. So I actually got asked to go on CNN to talk about the virus. I'm not a medical expert. I think they picked my name at random. That's fair enough. They wanted to talk to me because I tweeted about racism. Start of the pandemic, February 2020, I tweeted about racism. I actually got about 7 or 8 interview requests in that time. And the first question they asked me was, have you experienced anyone treating you differently since the outbreak of the virus? And I was like, well, mainly, I'm getting way more interview requests. My career is really taking off because of this thing. It was a great time for me, generally. Now, everyone has it. I kind of miss it when only Chinese people had it. Like, that was our thing. Why won't white people ever let us have our own thing? I'll say it. Coronavirus is cultural appropriation. There was a lot of hate around that time, in all seriousness. I actually didn't get that much. My main thing I got in real life was that my flatmate, Ted, told me that his mum told him to be careful of me. Let's just say I didn't top up the gas bill that month. Doesn't even make any sense. I'm no more likely to get it than he was. But a lot of people did get shit in real life. A lot of people got attacked. You probably saw the news stories. In fact, it happened here in Sheffield near the start of the pandemic. A Chinese student got attacked by 2 strangers. And I remember the story saying that the reason they attacked her is because she was wearing a mask and they thought that meant she had the virus. Now, I'm no scientist, but if I see someone I suspect of having a deadly disease, my first instinct is not to physically fight them. I must have missed that NHS pamphlet. Yeah, stay alert, wash your hands. Also, if you see someone with symptoms, just go pummel them to the ground for the length of time it takes to sing Happy Birthday twice. It was a bad time. I do know people who got attacked personally, and it's upsetting. It's upsetting stuff. It's upsetting because it implies that people no longer believe that Chinese people all know Kung Fu. And that is disgusting. That is disgusting. That is vile. What even is the point in racial stereotypes? You're telling me that is worth nothing? You're telling me people call me Jackie Chan for 30 years and that's worth nothing? They still think they can take me? Pointless. I did get a lot of abuse online. That was the main medium that people abused me because of the virus. A lot of tweets, a lot of racial abuse tweets, a lot of people saying stuff like, you are the virus, this is all your fault, please stay away from my son Ted. You know, very common racist tropes that everyone gets. It was a rough time. I got a lot of people tweeting me to condemn China. They're always like, why are you not condemning your homeland for this virus? Get a lot of stuff like that. And yeah, because not only did I invent the coronavirus, the Cheng virus, I like to call it, but it was my home country of China, not the UK, where I was born and have lived all my life, China that helped spread it across the world, which, according to the same people, is also a hoax and doesn't exist. It's madness. A lot of people are obsessed with China online, I noticed. A lot of people are very obsessed with China. And even before the pandemic, people always used to tweet asking me to condemn China. Anytime I tweet anything about the UK, they'd be like, what about China? Why don't you talk about China? And look, I'm not going to condemn China. I'm not going to call out China for one simple reason. They're fucking scary, man. You think I'm going to call out China? I don't want to end up dead in a ditch. Never satirize anyone who has been known to hire paid assassins. I'm talking China, Russia, Prince Andrew. The main three threats to Western democracy, I feel. Yeah, it's a weird time to tweet and stuff. Like a lot of people, there's a real culture wars going on around now, and a lot of people are obsessed with free speech. They're always like, oh, you can't say anything anymore these days. You can't say anything anymore these days. Fun fact, if you're a comedian, you say you can't say anything anymore these days, 3 times in front of a mirror, you get given a Netflix special. You are allowed to say most things. You're still allowed to say most things and most words. It just happens, there's like 0.1% of things that you can't say. They're pretty bad things. Anyone who says you can't say anything anymore these days wants to be able to say really bad things. Like there's a whole cohort of people I discovered online who really adamantly want to keep referring to Chinese restaurants as a Cheng. I'm like, that's the hill you want to die on? That's what you want free speech for? They always want so little. It's not ever to protest the government. It's just so they can say racial slurs. And the defense of it is so spurious. It's like, we've always called it that, so we should keep calling that. It's too late to change. What? People learn whole new languages. Back yourself a bit. An 80-year-old man climbed Mount Everest. I think you can learn how to say the phrase Chinese restaurant. Also, another defense they use is it's fewer syllables than saying Chinese takeaway. It's fewer syllables. Why stop there? Why not just call it a cha? I'm going to have a cha tonight. I'm going to order the swa and sa pa with ra. You all understood what I said there. Since when have we had a shortage of syllables? Is there some kind of syllable drought I'm not aware of? Are the syllable ice caps melting? Are we all hoarding our syllables? Look, if you're really obsessed with wasting too many syllables, I suggest you learn how to shut the fuck up. That's all I have to say on that. Thank you. Thank you. Liam Neeson level stuff there. Great. Yeah, there's always free speech. These people, they always want to say bad things. Like they say, oh, you can't say anything. You can still say most words. It just happens the ones you can't say are racial slurs. Like, why do people want to say racial slurs so bad? Where there's so many great words you can still use. Like, there's so many great words which are going underused, like velociraptor. Why do you use that word? People always invoke freedom. Another thing free speech people like to do is they go, oh, it's not racist, it was just a joke. The two are not mutually exclusive. Something can be racist and be just a joke. That's why they're called racist jokes. Like, that's a thing. It's like, you can't just say. I think hate crime is the only crime where you can then retroactively say it was just a joke. You can't do that for like tax fraud. I can't claim I filled in my expenses wrong, ironically. I can't tell HMRC that, oh, that self-assessment was a comment on tax fraud, not actual tax fraud. It's the only one. People only invoke freedom when they want to do bad things. Like when people say it's a free country, it's just after being a prick. No one ever says it after doing something nice. It's never like, oh, thanks for holding open the door. Oh, it's a free country, have a nice day. Free speech. People get mad. They want to be able to say anything, like literally anything. I'm just checking how much time we have. We're doing all right on time. That's good. People want to literally say anything. You can't say anything. Like, you'll never be able to say anything. It's like, oh, we want to be able to say anything. Okay, well, you want to be able to express yourself any way possible. And they're like, yeah, anything. Okay, well, how about taking a knee against racism? No, not that. Not that. That's where they draw the line, taking a knee. A lot of people booed taking a knee, and it's really bad because taking a knee is like the least aggressive thing you could do to show solidarity. It's literally sitting down. You're booing people for sitting down, but that's the thing. People will hate anything that reminds them of their own racism. That's the key there, that they will hate any gesture, but a lot of people denied that was racist to boo that, and I think that was just wild, all of that. Another thing people get very mad at is that a lot of free speech people get very mad whenever I say the phrase white people. They really hate it when I say white people. I get accused a lot for being racist towards white people. And it is just different. It's not the same thing when you say white people. It's not the same. Racism, it's not the same. And I'll tell you why it's different. It's different because white people are just so funny. You gotta admit, guys, you are just so funny. White people, just very comical as a concept. You should be able to joke about white people. It's so funny. You guys conquered the world. You guys conquered the world, and your main weaknesses are UV light and criticism. That is hilarious. They really did not like that in Hitchin. That bit. They took a knee against that in Hitchin. Very much so. People are so mad. I'm happy to be wrong about white people. I tweet a lot about white people, probably too much. And I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy if in 40 years' time, all those tweets become problematic. Like, all my views about white people are then problematic. Basically, I'm saying I'm happy if in 4 years' time, it becomes the main reason my grandchildren hate visiting me. They're just like, oh, I don't want to visit Grandpa Ken. He's so racist towards white people. And I'm just like, shut up, you snowflake. You can't say anything these days. And their parents will be like, oh, you can't blame him. That's the generation he's born in. Everyone was racist towards white people back then. I got a tweet which said, all Cheng does is shit on white people. And I was like, hey, what I do in the privacy of my own home is nobody's business. It wouldn't be okay the other way around. That's a big one. People say, it wouldn't be okay the other way around. And I'm just like, yes, that is correct. It's fine this way around. Thanks for agreeing with me. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It wouldn't be okay the other way around. Like, you can't just switch the situation around and expect the same rules to apply. Like, imagine if I went to the doctor and the doctor told me to take my trousers off, and I was like, hold on, this wouldn't be okay the other way around. Biggest case of it wouldn't be okay the other way around was when they announced that the new Little Mermaid was going to be played by a black actress. And the internet was so mad. A lot of racists were so mad. They were like, oh, this wouldn't be okay the other way around. You would be angry if they made a white Mulan. The situation's not the same. I think, yeah, I would be annoyed if they took a story about a Chinese woman from Chinese legend set in ancient China and made her white. It's not the same as taking a mermaid who lives in the ocean, making her black. It's not the same. Also, they remade Ghost in the Shell with Scarlett Johansson, so they've already done that. It wouldn't be okay the other way around. People are so angry about that. They said stuff like, this has ruined my childhood. This has ruined my childhood. Look, if Ariel's whiteness was integral to your childhood, then you were a racist child. No one walked out of the cinema in 1989 being like, oh, do you know what I really loved about The Little Mermaid? Her white skin. I hope they don't change that in any subsequent remakes. Another weird argument people made was, she's Danish, so she has to be white. She's Danish? Excuse me. She's Danish, so she has to be white? You can have black Danes. I think In a world where there's half fish women, you can have black Danes. That's within the realms of possibility. A lot of free speech people want to. A big part of free speech is that you should be able to debate, especially debate racists. I think there's this big contingent who think we should be able to debate racism, and we should therefore put racists on TV, give them a platform, and that will show everyone how stupid racism is, and then racism will just go away. I'm like, how's that going for you? We defeated racism yet? I don't think that worked. You know how I feel about debate. It's not useful at all. Like, I don't debate anyone. That's my new rule. I used to think, oh, we should debate racism, but I don't debate anymore. I don't even believe debating is a thing. And if you disagree, well, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. I got a weird thing in my throat. Excuse me. This is not as exciting as the Zoom call ending, but my memory of debate is that when I was 15, I was actually on the school debating team. We did one debate, which went awful because we were terrible, and it was about school uniform, whether school uniform should be compulsory in UK schools. And we were for, and they were against. And they came up with this ridiculous argument, the other team. They said the school uniform stifles creativity, and that is the reason that we haven't had any inventions or any good works of art in the last 300 years, which is a terrible argument, but I was so bad at debating, I just let that slide. But then my friend John, who was on my team, he picked up on it, and he was like, oh, you said that thing about not having a good piece of art in the last 300 years. And I could see the corner of my eye, my English teacher was like, yes, someone picked up on it. Someone is going to take them down on that. And then my friend John said, well, what about Westlife? That's what he went for. What about Westlife? Out of all the works of art, he went for Westlife. I can see the viral video now. 15-year-old destroys opponent in debate with facts and logic and Westlife. But the worst part is that even in that line of argument, they still managed to school us because they came back with the argument, well, I think you'll find that Westlife is an Irish band and therefore not relevant to our debate on school uniform in the UK. They schooled us. But then my friend John, he came back and he said, actually, I think you'll find they're a Northern Irish band, which they're not. But I think he knew that, but I think he was so invested in the Westlife maneuver that he was willing to take this to the end. And the worst part is they believed him. They believed him because that's how powerful confidence is in a debate. But then they came back with another argument, which was, is Westlife good enough to be considered creative? And that became the whole debate for the next 10 minutes. That's why I don't debate. My way of debating is simple. What I do is anytime anyone tweets me, I reply exactly once, and then I immediately block them so they can't reply. And then I take what they said and read it out on stage to an on-site audience and take them down after having months to formulate my argument. That is debate. It's a hard debate. It's hard to debate racists. It is genuinely very hard because, I'll tell you, I still remember the first bit of racist abuse I ever got when I first signed up on Twitter, is that it was just a comment which all it said was, it was a reply to my tweet. It all says, Ken, you eat dog. That's all it said. Ken, you eat dog. How do I debate against that? How do I defeat that with rhetoric in the marketplace of ideas? It's not like I could be like, you committed several logical fallacies there. That's not an effective debate in that situation. You cannot debate racists. It just doesn't work. It doesn't achieve anything. I get a lot of that stuff. It is hard. It is hard, actually. It gets to you, like the amount of stuff you get. And some of it you just can't do anything about. Like some of it is as basic. Like a lot of it, some of it can be turned into comedy, but a lot of it is just got like that, which is just pure abuse. And I remember when I first started tweeting about race, I noticed that I lose a lot of white followers. That's something I noticed. But at the same time, I gain a lot of ethnic minority followers too. Basically, my Twitter's being reverse gentrified. It's become one of those no-go areas for white people. People are talking about. Yeah, I get a lot of hate. I got a abusive message after my gig in Hitchin. Someone tweeted me. Actually, they found my Facebook page and they replied to one of my comments, being like, "That's 1 hour of my life I'm never getting back." And I thought, same. You and me both. We're not so different, you and I. We have some common ground in that we both hate the fact that I'm on stage. I bombed for a whole hour in Hitchin, and I wasn't even mad, really. It was such a surreal experience. I was bombing for a whole hour. There was no reaction to this entire show, not a single laugh. And it's surreal. It's surreal doing a comedy show with no laughs because it's based on the idea there will be laughs. If you take a comedy show and take away the laughs, do you know what it becomes? It becomes a bad comedy show. That's what it was. It just felt like I was doing a bad show. And it actually messed with me a bit. Like, Edinburgh did it well. It mostly went well in Edinburgh because Edinburgh is quite a diverse city. But there were still some audiences which really hated it. Some people in the audience, you could tell, were really against it. And that made me wonder, like, am I actually doing anything of value if people, if it's just that divisive? Like, should I be doing these shows about race? And I actually considered, during that run, this might be the very last show I ever do about race, and I'll do the next one about crisps or something. But then towards the end of the run, I was walking out of a venue, and I bumped into this quite well-known comedian that I know a bit. We've gigged together a few times, and we're with the same agent. I shouldn't say that bit. Don't forget I said that bit. That's too much identifying. I never usually say that. I don't know why I said that. That narrows it down to like 30 people. I ran into a successful comedian and no other details. And we knew each other a bit, and he stopped me and he said, "Oh, I really enjoyed your show. I came to see your show. I really enjoyed it." And that was really nice. Like, I didn't know he had seen my show. He had never seen any of my shows before. And fun fact, he was actually the first ever comedian I saw in Edinburgh when I went there 10 years ago. I wasn't barely a comedian then. So it meant a lot to me that he was saying this. And that kind of really cheered me up about the whole run. And then he said, "I really enjoyed that joke you do about The Big Short." Now, I don't mention The Big Short in my show, but it is mentioned in a show by a different Chinese comedian, Aaron Cheng. He thought I was Aaron Chen. He thought I was this other comedian, Aaron Chen. He'd watch a whole hour of Aaron Chen and been like, "Yeah, that was very good." And then he saw me in the street, someone he's met like 4 times, and he thought I was Aaron Chen, who, by the way, is Australian. He's Australian. He has an Australian accent, and he has a mullet. He thought I was Aaron Chen, which the worst part is that meant he didn't even see my show, which meant I was deprived a compliment. Not only did I get mistaken for another Chinese comedian, but I was deprived a compliment about my stand-up. And I don't know what's worse, to be honest. Also, it wasn't even Phil Wang, which means I've gone down in the pecking order. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do in this situation because I'm very used to avoiding conflict. That's why I never say anything. That's why I never say anything when people come up to me in these villages. I never say anything when people say ni hao to me. I just don't like confronting that. But I was up there doing the show about race, and this thing had happened to me during this run, and I was already feeling quite weird about the whole thing. And I was like, at least this is narratively quite interesting. I think it was thematically on point. It was like some kind of metaphor. And I just thought, I had to say something. I had to say something because if a white man is racist in the woods and no one calls him out, has he been racist at all? A lot of people would just use that to just think, oh, there was no racism that occurred. So I said something. I said, excuse me, that was actually Aaron Chen. And he was mortified. He was really mortified, and he apologized. He was very apologetic. I think he was quite drunk. It was like midnight, and he'd been drinking, and he apologized. And then he went home. We went home, and I checked my Twitter, and he had sent me a long apology on Twitter, which was nice, which was what you should do in that situation. Plus, he followed me back, so one more white follower. That was great. I don't really hold him any ill will. I have no real ill will against him. I don't really hold that against him, but it's more about the system for me. It's not about the individual. It's about what it says about the system and society that a quite successful comedian could end up doing something like that. And he's not like, the thing about him, he's very successful. He's also quite rich, and he's educated, and he's quite young as well. So it's not just online hateful trolls. It's not stupid trolls who are capable of this kind of racism. And it's not just random people in small towns like Hitchin. It's not just your flatmates' mums. It's anyone. Anyone's capable of that. And that's something that I think people are very afraid of. That we all have that in us. And I don't mean all white people. I mean everyone. All people of all colors are capable of that kind of racial bias. And that is scary to a lot of people. I think Britain is very good at racism now because it's scared of that concept, that we're scared to see that in ourselves. Like, just take the events a few days ago after the final. There was a lot of racist abuse to footballers, and England, our government came out and said, a lot of politicians came out and said, this does not represent England. These racists do not represent our country. If they don't represent our country, then why do they have the England flag in their bios? The England flag, whose sole purpose is to show representation of a country. They do represent us because they're from here. They represent the worst in us. And I think British people really, really love trying to distance themselves from that. I saw the same thing during the events surrounding George Floyd's murder, which is that a lot of British people thought that could never happen in the UK. We don't have a racist police force in the UK, which is not true. It's not true. I'll tell you one more story before I go, which is 7 years ago, I was staying at my parents' house. And my parents' house is quite a rough area. And I walked out of my parents' house, and on the street, it was about midnight, it was quite late at night. I walked out of my parents' house. On the street were these two black teenagers, maybe like 14 to 18 years old, like older teenagers. And one of them had been stabbed. And one of them came up to me and said, how can you help me? My friend's been stabbed. So I called 999, and I called for an ambulance, and I waited for them with them. And before the ambulance arrived, the police arrived. And this is where things got weird, because out of the police car walked a policeman and policewoman, both white, and they walked straight up to the two teenagers, and they came in very aggressive, and they said, "Do you know who did this? Do you know the people who did this?" And they were like, we don't know them, they were random people, we don't know who they were. And then the policewoman said, "I think you do know the people who did this. I think you're lying." So when people say, we don't have a racist police force, it's not true. They were very much came at this with this idea that they were playing good cop, bad cop, except it was more like racist cop, racist cop. That was the vibe. And then what happened was that she turned to me, and then her voice softened, and she asked me, "Do you think they know the people who did this?" What the hell? What, am I, some kind of detective now? That's your job. I don't know why you're asking me for. Well, I didn't realize they're asking me because they wanted me to show them that I'm like one of them. I'm someone who can trust. And that was quite a weird situation for me because I'd never really been in that situation. I didn't know what to say. And what I ended up saying was, I don't know. Maybe they do. On the other hand, maybe they don't. Way to speak truth to power there, Ken. I might as well have said, I don't know which team I'm on. But I should have. I should have known what team I was on, because what they were doing was wrong, but I didn't know what to do in that situation. And also I stupidly thought that they would, because I was a person of color and these were people of color, that the police would look at me the same way they did them. But they didn't do that, because what I realized is very different being a Chinese man than being black. And that's something that didn't really, that I wasn't really aware of, that I had a lot of privilege in that situation. I have a lot of inherent trust, and I have power in that situation. And what I should have done, I should have used my power to help those who had less privilege, but I didn't. I didn't say anything. I just went home. I just left it, and I didn't see those people again. It's not enough to merely not be racist. That's the thing I've learned. It's not enough to simply be not racist, because our system is really corrupt and racist. And to change a system, you can't just do nothing. The system relies on people doing nothing. The system relies on people being merely not racist, which is what I used to be. I used to simply be happy that I was just not racist. But that isn't enough. It's not enough to be not racist. You have to be virulently anti-racist. And that's why I started doing shows about race. That's why I'm going to keep doing shows about race. And it is hard. It is hard. It's a hard tightrope to walk. But there is something good about doing comedy about race, because if you can take something racist and turn it into a laugh, at least you have some power over it. And at least that's doing something. If I was in that situation again, I wouldn't answer the same way. If the policewoman asked me that same question, do you think they know the person who stabbed him? I would say, yes, I think it was Liam Neeson. I've been Cheng. You've been fantastic. Thank you very much. Oh. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, just to say thanks so much. It's really nice for you to come down here. It's really nice being in Sheffield. First time I've been here. Great city. And yes, keep supporting the festival. It's a great festival. Everyone involved has been really nice and really supportive. So thank you. Have a good rest of your evening. Bye.